Welcome to Let There Be Light. This is going to be a journey together for folks who are exploring solar and looking at this through the lens of communities of faith. And today's presentation is hosted by Crossroads Solar, GAI, and CollectiveSun. So let me tell you a little bit about who's here today. My name's Lee. I'm going to be your moderator, and we have three amazing speakers. Patrick, who is the founder and president of Crossroads Solar, which is a solar panel manufacturer based in South Bend, Indiana, as well as Chris from Green Alternatives Incorporated, also based in Indiana, and Nicole Withrow from CollectiveSun, our account manager based here in San Diego. Today's journey is going to take us through a variety of aspects and really cover all the bases that you need to know about going solar. First, Patrick will talk about solar manufacturing. So Patrick created a solar factory in Indiana, which is an amazing feat on its own, but we'll go into some more of the details about what he created in South Bend and why it matters to communities of faith, because it turns out what Patrick's doing in Indiana is more than solar panels, more than just about solar panels. This is more than electrons and kilowatt hours. And there's a broader story to connect with as people of faith and for your house of worship. And then Chris from Green Alternatives is going to talk a little bit about some of the solar basics. Maybe you're new to solar, how to get started, some of the things you should understand with his years of experience in the solar installation industry. And then last, but certainly not least, the financing. Nicole will talk about financing solar and how do you pay for this? How do you actually get these projects built and done? And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So please be sure to take a moment, find your Q&A button, and feel free to submit questions as we go along. And we'd be happy to answer them as we get to the Q&A section. So with that, let me welcome and introduce you to Patrick Regan, who is the president and CEO of Crossroads Solar based in South Bend, Indiana. So Patrick, please tell us all about Crossroads Solar.
All about Crossroads Solar. Thanks, Lee. As president of Crossroads Solar, I got the coolest job on the planet, I think. Before starting Crossroads, I had an equally cool job. I was an academic, a professor of political science and peace studies, and I ended my career at Notre Dame. Importantly, what I got the opportunity to do while teaching at Notre Dame was to teach in the Westville prison, which is a state prison near the west side of the state of Indiana. And an outgrowth of teaching in the prison was I quit my job at Notre Dame and started Crossroads Solar. What I learned in the prison are lots of things about people who make egregious mistakes, about the skills and motivations and commitments of people who made those egregious mistakes. And importantly for this webinar, but also for my life, I learned about the importance of forgiveness and reconciliation. And those two concepts are simply hardwired into faith communities. So I have this edifice of a project that is tied to the notion of accepting people for who they are and what they've done and give them another opportunity to get things right in life. You want to switch slides, please? So what we have is we have a company that builds solar panels that are like every other solar panel that you could think of, almost. So that's the core of the business, but the foundation of the business is the men and women reintegrating from prison into society. So all of our workers, everyone but me, is a felon, and we accept them into our team in the spirit of forgiveness and reconciliation. And many of them would have never made it in our society because few people would hire them. I have murderers and bank robbers and attempted murders, and just the range is there, and a lot of that, their past excludes them from many other jobs. So we make a great panel with a great social mission, and we pay our employees as well as we can pay them, which is a perfectly adequate wage in our community. And in return, we get dedicated and committed employees who see the opportunity that's in front of them. One of the things that we do, and one of the foundations for this webinar, is that interleaving of faith and stewardship of the planet and the people on the planet. Creation care is one of the terms that often gets us there. I come from a Catholic tradition, and a papal encyclical called Laudato Si links marvelously, frankly, care for the poor of the planet and care for the planet itself, the climate of the planet. So we support those two social missions with one enterprise, one business. We support our neighborhoods, and I use neighborhood more broadly. The 12 people who work for me today and the 24 who will start working for me in August, we used to pay to incarcerate them. And now they pay taxes, they pay income taxes, they pay social security taxes, they pay property taxes, they pay gasoline taxes, and they all see a future that is their life without prison. And I also think that one of the most important things that we can focus on in this webinar and beyond is the way we teach our youth about being stewards of the planet. And they inherit a planet that is under stress. It's under stress for climate reasons. It's also under stress for social reasons, as we could see in a Texas school and a shopping mall in Buffalo. But the planet under stress was not caused by any 10-year-old. It was caused by a lot of people my age. And they need to see that the adults are working hard to make things better. And that's what congregations can do. So they also need to see that there's value in human beings, regardless of their history and regardless of their background. And one of the ways to teach them that is bring them into a process where your congregation is demonstrating that you're strong stewards of the planet, and let them participate in thinking about going solar, designing solar. You want me to, if you're local enough or Zoomed enough, you want me to come talk to the youth group, I'd be happy to do that. But a unique aspect of faith communities is that you have access to and responsibility for the youth. So your prime vehicle for demonstrating your commitment to the planet. And that puts this project in an ideal location to talk about putting faith in action. The planet's in peril, and spiritual communities have the ability to lead in that action, and teaching our congregants and teaching our children about the importance of living those values is paramount to faith communities. So I hope you'll join us in going forward with this if you can. And we're happy to talk about it as you push it forward. Thank you. Lee, you could, Chris, I think is going to take over from here.
Thanks, Patrick. I actually want to add a brief epilogue to Patrick's chat. I've had a chance to visit Crossroads Solar, and Patrick showed me around. Representatives of Crossroads have visited our shop on a couple occasions, and I have gotten to meet and shake hands with and make direct eye contact and engage Patrick's employees, and it's a great reaction that I get from these guys. To I try to treat them coming in like I don't know the mission of Crossroads, and to treat these guys as professional peers. It's amazing the reaction I get from them. It's really edifying. So yeah, we love the concept of Crossroads, and we hope to install a lot of their product. So now to introduce me then, my name's Chris, as you heard earlier. As you can see, Patrick cleaned up his appearance facially for this presentation, and I wound up growing his beard in his place. My background is different than Patrick's in a lot of key ways. I have a very technical background. I graduated as an electrical engineer and worked for several decades in the automotive industry. A coworker and I, actually an employee and I, wound up starting a solar business on the side for a couple of reasons. One, first, to start helping out our parents, if at all possible, with fixed expenses. Secondly, to prove that you can actually have a company and earn a living without being a jerk, frankly. Working 30 years for an entirely investor-owned company that has to focus almost entirely on shareholder value, it really doesn't. It doesn't satisfy. So here we are, and we've grown quite a bit. From a technical standpoint, I would say we're one of the older and more mature installation companies in the state. I have served past terms on the board of directors of the State Renewable Energy Association, and I am currently on the Energy Advisory Committee for Ivy Tech, which, for those of you not from Indiana, is the state vocational technical school where a lot of people can go and get 2-year degrees and technical certificates. In Lafayette, Indiana, they have a strong renewable energy program. We've been a company since 2008, and we stopped moonlighting 2015, 2016 between the two of us. So, AG, next slide, please. Okay, so in a nutshell, I'm going to start at a high level. Like I said, my background is engineering. I can bore people to death socially because of that. And my wife says I frighten the children when I talk like an engineer. So I'm going to try to keep this fairly high level, and it winds up maybe being less than some of you know, but feel free to answer or ask any more detailed questions that you have at the end. So when we talk solar energy, we're talking photovoltaic. You may also see the abbreviation PV. Photovoltaics refers to the property of a material that when sunlight hits it, it generates current flow, electricity. And a solar panel employs PV cells to generate a lot of electricity, and then the whole job of the panel is to harness it and send it out a pair of wires on the back of it. An array or a system uses a lot of panels to make a lot of power. It adds up like a stack of flashlight batteries, for those of you old enough to have flashlight batteries. There is DC power coming off of a solar panel, which is not directly usable by most things in your house, office, or church. And so you need an inverter that converts the DC to AC, which then becomes a usable form. The last component of a system that everyone thinks of, or very many think of, well, based on the questions that we get, is battery storage. Now, battery storage is entirely optional. The majority of systems going in are what they just call grid tied. There is no storage at all. What you have is the output of your solar array. Here, I'll do two wires, and your electric supply coming in from the utility are actually in parallel. They are physically connected inside the building. And so as far as your building is concerned, you don't know what power you're using. You could be generating it, or at night, obviously you're not generating your own from solar, you're buying from the utility, and some combination thereof on intermittent cloudy days, or if you have a small system. So that's an important concept. It does mean that, and I guess one misconception that I'll just address here and then move on. If you don't have batteries, even though you are connected to because you are connected to the utility grid, it is possible for you to push energy onto those wires. If the grid fails for some reason, or is intentionally turned off for maintenance or for brownouts or wildfire protection, the inverter has to shut off, or at least isolate, so that it's not possible to push any power onto lines that are being worked on. What that means is, if you have a grid-tied system and you lose the grid, you cannot use any of the energy that is potential from your system. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next slide. Now, this is a general flow. And as Lee pointed out, we're in Indiana. However, this flow is going to be geographically agnostic. There is some version of every step on here, anywhere in the country where you're going to install solar. And in terms of importance, I have had projects go off the rails at every single one of these steps, depending on the project. So everyone is the most important, put it that way. At the beginning is planning. So you want to analyze your needs based on how much energy you're using. You really should analyze how much you could save by using less. So that would cut me out of the picture to a great extent if you're using less. And then compare your needs, your goals with your budget and the physical constraints of your property. Then you can get an idea of what you need. You can solicit proposals. It's important to do some homework regarding not only the system that you're considering purchasing, but also in the people that are proposing to sell it to you and install it, and therefore maintain it later throughout its lifespan. And on that consideration, then you can select an installer. I strongly recommend that you do some homework by talking to people who have used this installer, and maybe seek them out on your own, not necessarily, because honestly, if you ask me for some, I'm going to give you my favorite customers as reference. So just be aware of that. And once you've selected an installer and you have a contract in place, you're going to then do a lot of paperwork. You're going to apply for, or your installer will, with your input and assistance and signature, apply for permits, apply for utility interconnection, and apply for financing. In different parts of the country, in fact, in different parts of our state, even in different parts of the county, the permitting requirements and costs are drastically different, over a political boundary. So that is hard to generalize. Just be aware that that could be pretty complicated, or it could be super simple. Interconnection is what your utility requires, and many of them have, all of them have some process that involves you signing a legal agreement with them that you're going to abide by their requirements for connecting. Remember, we said we had two sources now, the utility and your own system in parallel. So this is the agreement of what you're going to do and not do with that. And it defines the financial relationship between the two. Financing is extremely important, obviously, because none of these systems are inexpensive necessarily, but that's something I won't talk to you. You'll hear some ideas from Nicole shortly. Now, the installation quite frequently is the shortest part of this whole process. We do have to finalize the design, and what has been actually the lengthiest part of this process lately is procure material. So if you're buying something that your installer has in the warehouse, that's a best case scenario. The install and test, once all the paperwork and material acquisition is done, excuse me, is generally fairly straightforward. But then again, a lot of that will depend on the complexity of your specific site. After that, there's a time for inspection from your local jurisdiction, and frequently the utility will need to put eyes on it before they approve and change your meter to the final meter, and then you receive permission to operate. So in a nutshell, that's the flow. There's a lot of details on each one of these. Like I said, this is kind of high level. If you have specific questions, because the details will vary depending on pretty much every factor that we've mentioned so far, you can ask any specific questions later in the Q&A. All right, and I think with that, we can hand it over to Nicole for some financing discussion.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. I am Nicole Withrow, account manager at CollectiveSun. And for those of you who are not familiar with CollectiveSun, we are a solar finance company that specializes in helping nonprofit and tax-exempt organizations nationwide fund solar projects. To date, over 180 nonprofits across 24 states have gone solar with CollectiveSun, and over 50% of those projects have been with communities of faith. So one of the benefits of working with CollectiveSun is that we help tax-exempt organizations take advantage of the investment tax credits, or the ITC, associated with the purchase of a solar. Nonprofits normally can't access by themselves. We'll talk about that in more detail in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the benefits, the impact of nonprofits going solar. So the benefit and impact of going solar, they're abundant, and I'm sure that most of you are very well aware of those. There are environmental benefits, like transitioning from harmful fossil fuels to the clean renewable energy of solar that reduces your carbon footprint. And when you make this change, you're living creation care theology. You're demonstrating faith in action with your commitment to caring for all creation, including the planet. There's social impact. Nonprofits are not only the backbones of our communities, they are our community leaders. And when a nonprofit goes solar, they're setting this positive example, leading the community to adopt clean energy by practicing what you preach. There's the financial impact. When nonprofits save money by controlling what they're spending on energy, they create savings that for a nonprofit can mean the ability to redirect those funds, that savings, into programs that support your mission-driven initiatives, the programs that support and strengthen your community. So clearly there's no shortage of benefits to going solar. Now for the big question. Next slide, please. How does CollectiveSun help? How do we work? We utilize a prepaid service agreement called a solar power agreement, or SPA. Through the SPA CollectiveSun being a for-profit, we can access the tax benefits associated with the purchase of a solar system. So we can monetize the tax benefits, and then we share some of that with the nonprofit through our SPA discount, that tax-like credit, allowing nonprofits to save 12% or more, depending on the total cost of your solar system, off the cost of going solar. So where does the 88% come from? We're going to come back to that, but let me just give you a teaser. There are lots of options there. CollectiveSun, under this solar power agreement, or SPA, we will own, operate, and maintain the solar system. The nonprofit will own the energy generated by the solar system from day one, and they will keep any other incentives or rebates that exist for them. And that can vary across the country depending on where you're located. So if you have available to you renewable energy credits, net metering benefits, state, local, or utility incentives, any benefit that exists for you that's available in your area that you qualify for as a nonprofit will stay with you. Your nonprofit will benefit from that. During the time we own the solar system, we're responsible for operations and maintenance of that system. So there's a nice safety net there for nonprofits going solar. At the end of the 6th year, we make it super easy for the nonprofit to take ownership of the solar system for no additional cost, terminating the SPA and making the nonprofit the second owner of a vetted solar system. We are paid strictly off tax benefits. There are no fees associated with working with CollectiveSun. We provide technical assistance to the nonprofit as you compare proposals and explore different funding options. And we provide valuable project management to help during the installation process. And now I promised, I gave you a teaser that there were lots of options for where you could come up with that remaining 88% after we reduce your out-of-pocket costs by 12% or more. So those options include, let's see here. There are a variety of loan options. So everything from commercial PACE, property assessed clean energy loans, loans from your existing banking relationship, loans from denominational lending programs that would be associated with your particular community of faith. Impact investors that might be community members that want to support your organization going solar, and because of that commitment to you, might be willing to act as an impact investor where they provide you a loan at a really, really beneficial interest rate and term, perhaps no interest, which is even better for everybody. But the items that are on this list that often go, that get skipped over, a lot of times people don't realize that if they have grant funds or they have cash reserves or a combination of grant funds, donations, and cash reserves. You can utilize those and still partner with CollectiveSun, receive that tax-like credit, and have the support that you get in a solar power agreement in that process of going solar. All right, Lee, I think if you're ready, we're ready for some Q&A or any wise words you have to share.
Excellent, sure. Well, just before we jump into Q&A, to share the easy button with all of our viewers, in that originally when the webinar was being organized, we thought this would be great for a audience located in central Indiana and surrounding areas, and coming together with Green Alternatives as an installer and Crossroads Solar as a panel manufacturer and CollectiveSun as a financing company. If you're in the central Indiana or adjacent state area, please do reach out. This is a phenomenal and fantastic team. But don't worry if you are outside of those areas. This presentation is for a national audience, and there are folks from all across the country joining us. CollectiveSun does have relationships with installers across the country. We currently have projects in 24 different states, and we are very happy to support you and your communities of faith in your solar journey. So please do feel free to reach out to us. With that, we're going to transition into some Q&A. So Patrick and Chris, if you'd like to join us back at the podium. And we've added a slide here in case you are wondering what Patrick looks like with a beard and Chris looks like without his beard, and what I look like when I forget to comb my hair. There are a bunch of questions which we'll jump into, and please feel free to add additional questions as they pop up. But first, Chris mentioned the factory tour that he took, and we were so lucky and delighted to come visit Patrick and the factory and explore the amazing work that's happening there. Patrick, can you talk a little bit about the tours that you offer and what folks would need to do if they want to take a tour?
Sure. If they're local, I mean, I guess you get on a plane and come see a factory as you did. We're happy to have people come. I mean, it's a working factory, so large groups make it more cumbersome than small groups. Yeah, if from my own point of view, it's kind of fascinating to see how a solar panel actually starts with a cell and ends up being a panel that generates the power through the seemingly complex problem that Chris laid out. But reach out and call me or email me, and if it works, I'm happy to try and make it happen. If it's a large group, I would say after we're done for the day would be easier than during the day.
And I want to encourage you, especially if you're in the area, and share what a transformational experience that was for us. Not just transforming cells into modules, but transforming lives in ways that aren't always measured on a spreadsheet, as us accountants tend to do. And Chris, can you talk a little bit, question about roofing? What do folks have to consider with their roof condition?
Yeah, so in general, you want something that's probably pretty recently redone. There's no hard and fast rule as to it has to be 30 months or less kind of thing, but just realize that the warranty, if you're mounting on the roof and you don't have the luxury of putting the system on the ground next to the building, but if you're mounting on your roof, the hardware that we would put up there is expected to last 25 to 30 years with little to no maintenance. And if the traditional roofing, I'm thinking specifically of, for instance, asphalt shingles, or even most rubber membranes have warranties that will end sooner than that. So at some point, if you've already used a big chunk of that roof life and then you put solar on it, we'll have to take all the solar off of it the next time roof work needs to be done or the roof has to be replaced, and then put the solar back. So just be thinking of the life cycle cost when you're doing that. Yeah.
Excellent. And Nicole, there's a couple of questions for you. One of them about, can you work in Tennessee, Kentucky? So where in the country, and what do folks need to consider about the ability to utilize that tax credit?
Great. So we're able to work with any nonprofit that's in an area where third-party ownership is permitted. Now, in some states, that's determined on a state level, and on others, they're deregulated, meaning that that decision is made at the utility level. So if you try a Google search, look on your Public Utility Commission's website, try your utility company's website. If you do a few tries and you just can't get a straight answer, my go-to is please reach out to CollectiveSun. That's what we do. We can help you with that if you're really not sure. And there's also a great resource on desireusa.org. So DSIREUSA.org. That is limitless, just an abundance of resources state by state. You can find out what's available in your area.
Excellent. Chris, looks like one for you. Is it cheaper to install on the ground rather than the roof?
I'm going to say over the life of the system. Well, gosh, I'm going to say my favorite thing first. That depends. Over the life of the system, odds are yes, for a number of reasons. Any after install service over a 20-year period can be done on the ground. That would be a lot less expensive than perhaps renting equipment to get up on the roof or get some material off the roof. The biggest thing really is it's going to be more productive because any simulation, helioscope is a tool that it's like an industry standard, and we can, with great accuracy, simulate what your system is going to produce over its lifetime, or over year one anyway, and then project out. And the identical system on the ground versus the roof loses like up just under 6% of its output because of the temperatures on the roof. So roofs are hot.
Yeah, and Chris, there's more roofing questions. Dana wants to know, what about a metal roof?
Metal roofs, there are several kinds of metal roofs with unique attachment options. So that's not out of the question at all. Metal shingles, this is more of a residential than necessarily a commercial, or maybe depending on your church, I suppose. Metal shingles are like stamped 3D shapes out of metal that go, and they are really easily crushed. And so that's something that would probably be not possible or not cost effective if it were possible. Otherwise, there should be an option.
And Nicole, Robert wants to know if you can recover some of the roofing costs if you pair it with a solar installation. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yes. So there are some requirements that we have on our side, but the simple answer is yes, we can include a portion of those roof costs. Roofing is quite expensive, so just be forewarned that the majority of that cost we cannot include, but we can help a little bit with that.
And Rick wants to know, looks like a question about, they're in the middle of re-roofing multiple buildings at their church complex and want to know what types of roofs are considered not compatible with your system. So Chris, if Rick has a choice, what kind of roofing does he want to go with that are better or worse, or can you work with whatever they end up going with?
There are pretty much custom mounting systems for, well, first of all, there'll be different between a pitched roof and a flat roof, but there's pretty much something for almost every flavor, including clay tile or terracotta tiles. What I would just recommend is that you go with the longest life option of whatever it is that you choose.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia asked again about location, Houston, Texas. Absolutely, we've done projects in Texas. Richard, back to our roofing theme. I think our follow-up webinar will be about roofing. Do you work with the roofer with insurance, as in roof damage due to weather? I think, both Nicole or Chris, you could probably talk about the interplay during an installation with roofing and how that works.
I mean, from our perspective, what we typically see happen is that the roofer and the solar installer are going to work together. So what we want to do is protect your roof warranty. So we'll see after that new roof or roof repair is done, the solar installer will come in with his team. They'll lay down the racking, and then they'll have the roofer come back out and validate that those penetrations are watertight, that everything looks good. And that way we know that you've not lost that valuable roof warranty, and the installer knows they can carry on and proceed with that installation. That covers everyone. How about you, Chris? Anything you want to add?
There's
to
also,
that?
yeah, I picked up in there potentially a question about if a storm had blown through and damaged the roof, and there has to be kind of like coordination between the roofer and the installer. And definitely, because we've seen even in the last few months, hailstorms come through that damage the roofing material to a point where it has to be replaced. The system is okay, but then as the installer, we have to work with the insurance company and the roofing company to coordinate schedules, so that can be done at a minimum of inconvenience to a homeowner. So I would definitely talk to your, not only your installer when you get to that point, but also your insurance company, and because they'll have a role to play in that as well.
But I think the key there is really coordination
Yes.
between the installer and the roofer to protect the integrity of that warranty. Question from Dana, another geography about Illinois near Joliet. So that's certainly within the realm of serviceable territory. So please do reach out to Chris and Patrick. Duff had a question here. So if I understand what Nicole said, they can arrange a discount on the original install, but the church pays the cost. They own the system, but operate it for the church. Nicole, could you take a moment and maybe walk through what is an SPA? How does that work? And just kind of cover again, like the high level points of how that works for a nonprofit.
All right. So with the solar power agreement and SPA, CollectiveSun, the for-profit entity, is going to own the physical solar system, and we're going to monetize the tax benefits. We're going to reduce the cost for the nonprofit by 12% or more. We'll determine that discount based on their total project cost. So our pricing is very transparent. When we engage with you, we can share what that discount tier looks like. As the ITC changes, so does our discount. So just throwing that out there, we're coming to the end of the year where December 31st, if nothing changes, the ITC will be reduced. So right now it's at 26%. It is scheduled to step down to 22% at that time. Going back to the SPA, after we've reduced that cost by 12% or more, the nonprofit can fund that remaining 88% or less using any of those funding mechanisms that were mentioned or combinations of them. They will pay that directly to the installer following the construction milestone schedule. So by the time the system's built, everything's been paid. It's a prepaid service agreement. Now, just to kind of go over the basics, we are going to own the physical solar system, and the nonprofit's going to own the energy generated by this system from the moment it's powered on. They're also going to benefit from any incentives or rebates available to them at the state, local, or utility level. So that would mean anything that exists now, like renewable energy credits, net metering benefits, any kind of incentive coming from the state, utility, or local locality. They're going to keep any of those. In other words, anything outside of the federal tax benefits that exist in your area. And since we're talking to a nationwide audience, they vary dramatically from state to state, just what is available. They're extremely robust in some territories and simply non-existent in others. So all of those benefits stay with the nonprofit. At the end of 6 years, we make it super easy for the nonprofit to take ownership of the solar system. If you used a loan to fund that 88%, you don't need to pay that off before the end of that 6 years. You can repay that loan at whatever term length you agreed to with your lender. For example, we pair well with PACE. It's got a 20-year term, a 25-year term. You can continue to pay off that loan for whatever the term length is, but still take ownership of the solar system at the end of the 6th year.
Excellent. There was a question here on battery storage. So Chris, maybe you can talk about batteries a little bit. And this is typical costs. Maybe you can talk about costs for batteries.
Oh, these kind of questions are kind of like, how much does a house cost? Yeah, where is it? What is it? How many bedrooms? So with batteries, which even though they have dropped in price dramatically, they still add a significant cost to one of these projects. And so what we typically look at is, what really do you need? What is your, how do you want to use the battery? How do you want to use the storage? Because there's a couple of ways, depending on your utility rate structure. Some places have time of use rates. Then you could probably use the battery to store power when you wouldn't get much compensation for the utility if you pushed that power to grid, and then use that power at the peak price times of day. You can do something called self-consumption, which is a similar concept. It's to minimize what you push to the grid at whatever maybe low compensation level that you would get from the utility, and use it in yourself instead. Or it could be just for backup. If it's just for backup, then you need to make judicious decisions on what are the functions that we need in a powered down situation to keep going. If you want to run, a 30-ton AC unit and a commercial kitchen full of refrigeration and electric griddles, you need a mortgage. It's prohibitively expensive. From a house level, I know that, or just a residential system, a basic backup system would add, and this is probably a more helpful number, like a 40 to 60% premium over the sell price of just a grid tied system for a single house. The economics shift a little as you get into larger commercial size systems, but that's probably as much detail as I can give without a lot more detail on the question. Is that fair? I think.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I think we'll add, from the CollectiveSun perspective, we see storage make sense in certain parts of the country, and it's either for time shifting, so you're storing your energy when the sun is shining and then deploying it at a time when utility rates are higher, maybe in the evening, or for demand shaving, peak shaving, so lowering that demand. It all depends on the load profile of the host. And for houses of worship, which is probably more than half of our projects, what we see is you have a burst of energy. Your load profile is very high on Saturday or Sunday, as the case may be. You're running the lights, you're running the AC, you have amplification. And so you have this kind of steady, flat consumption Monday through Friday. And then, on Saturday or Sunday, you have this big peak. And so batteries can be helpful, but you really have to look at it on a case-by-case basis to explore whether or not it pencils for you and your particular project. There's a question here from Robert about remote Alaskan villages that are not connected. Could you use CollectiveSun to cover the costs, battery costs? So Nicole, battery costs, how does that work? And have we done projects in Alaska? And how would that work?
So that is a loaded question. So hi, Robert. I recognize Robert's name in the registrant list. So we have talked with folks, and we almost did a project in Alaska. There's nothing about Alaska that we cannot work with. But I think the thing that held up that particular project is there's a need for insurance. So just keep that in mind. Customers have to insure their solar system. As far as storage goes, we love adding storage to projects. There's nothing specific about Alaska and storage that would not work with CollectiveSun. We would just have to talk a little more in depth about the particular project. If what I heard in that question was off grid, that might present an issue. So we would just need to talk through pricing requirements and make sure that everything was okay for our investors.
Excellent. Questions, lots of great questions. Please keep those questions coming in. There was a question from Rick about after year 6. Can you talk a little bit about who handles the system maintenance and repair during each of the phases, and how the SBA interacts with that question about system maintenance?
Sure. So during the time that CollectiveSun owns the solar system, which is the first 6 years, we're responsible for any operations or maintenance of that solar system. So solar systems don't need a lot of maintenance. There are a lot of moving parts to be concerned about. But if anything does happen with that system, we are responsible for the cost of that repair or that maintenance during the time that we own the system. We also have some pretty robust pricing requirements that kind of help to protect the nonprofit even further, having production guarantees in there, having tier 1 equipment in there. So lots of things are done prior to engaging in the SPA, in preparation for the SPA that are going to make that operations and maintenance kind of, I don't know if it's another easy button. I know we started out talking about adding an easy button. I think that the way that we align the nonprofit's needs with the SPA is kind of adding another easy button, if you will.
Okay. There's a question about geography for Chris. Chris, where does Green Alternatives operate in with your geographic footprint?
We're fairly local right now. The vast majority of all our projects are in Illinois, Indiana, although we have ventured into Illinois, we ventured into Ohio, and can do so if, as we've discussed offline, we have kind of a network of the small independent installers. It's not formal in any way, but I can work to vet people if there's people on here interested in Crossroads panels and a CollectiveSun program. I can help evaluate your options for you to further the activity if that's of any value.
Excellent. And that's a great question. How can I, as a church member, try to gain support to help our church go solar? And maybe there's unique spins on this that each of you can share, but let's say someone's attending the webinar today, they're an engaged and active member of their congregation, and they want to advance a project. How do you go about doing that, becoming that internal solar champion and motivating a committed group to advance change and embrace change and advance the solar project? So Nicole, do you want to start there? Maybe we'll go down the line.
By the leaning in, I'm sorry. So I know Patrick and I think Chris also both led with saying how they had the best job in the world, but I just want to throw in here, I think I might be challenging them because I have the coolest job in the world. Because I talk to nonprofits who are exploring solar several times a day, many hours a day are spent hearing people at different stages of this journey talk about their own experiences. So to get back to the question, I will just say that, if you are on this call and you feel really alone in this journey because you somehow feel like you're the volunteer that just really decided it was important to go solar, you aren't alone. A lot of people across the country are going through that same thing. So how do you inspire your congregation? You can do that through your own excitement, because it is contagious. I think you can tell that everyone here on this panel feels a little contagious. We get excited about the energy behind talking about solar, talking about even the financing of solar. Who knew that could be fun and exciting? It is. The same thing is going to be true of your message. So as you share the information that you're gathering with either committee members, other volunteers, if you don't have a committee, build one. Get some support for yourself where you can share this message and they can kind of pass it along to folks that they engage with. But start events at the church, at the house of worship to kind of celebrate what you've learned so far and get more people excited. But as a side note, when it comes to the technical pieces, I'm sure that Chris and Patrick, as well as myself, that's part of what we do at CollectiveSun is prepare you for disseminating this information to your boards and committees and helping you overcome objections, which how dare they, but at some point, yes, there can be some obstacles, and we can help you with those conversations if you share that information with us. But I think by just speaking up and sharing what you're learning as you learn it, people are going to get excited, and we can help you with those conversations that feel more like overcoming obstacles or objections.
And I would also like to encourage you to look around in your area. I know that there is a statewide organization here with several local chapters there it's the Interfaith Power and Light. It's a non-denominational group designed to get in a community or a geographic region members of, if there is such a thing as a green ministry or an environmental ministry, from all of the congregations or communities of faith in that region to meet on a regular basis and share what works in their particular faith community. And if you may have one of those near you that you don't even know about, but I would go there for some great ideas and certainly credibility from a faith perspective. There's always a little bit of a potential backlash if you were to bring me in for my enthusiasm level, because I'm viewed as the guy who's going to take a check from you. So it's much more credible if you can find peers or like-minded ministers of other communities.
And if I may add to that, I think I'm open mic. I would say get the youth involved. And if you had, I mean, here we are adults talking to adults saying get more adults involved. And as a former political scientist, I would say get youth involved. Let the youth form a committee and let them get excited, enthusiastic, and take it to an adult committee and say, this is what you got to do. And get the pressure to come from the bottom rather than slowly from the top. So.
Excellent. And Patrick, maybe you can add a little bit, given your background. There was one question about what are some of the topics that you are available to present on, since it sounds like you have a wide repertoire of. I know you said a retired professor from Notre Dame, but if you were to put the jacket back on, what sorts of things can organizations, communities of faith that are listening today, might be available for a Zoom call or if they're local for you to come chat about?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. I think I could do it on a range of things, from youth uprisings to to solar panels, but let's stick with solar panels. I'd be happy to talk about the physical processes of generating solar, about Crossroads' social mission, about the need and importance of reducing dependence on fossil fuels at a personal level, at a community level, at a congregational level, and at a national and international level. I mean, I have given a number of talks in churches on climate policy, just how you can think about changing the policy that currently imperils the planet with regard to climate stress. So anything. And I'm an old academic. I can make stuff up if you need.
And in the last couple minutes we have here, maybe you can share a little bit of a sneak preview of what one of those might look like. We talked about sunshine. Let's talk a little bit about hope, and what does that mean for somebody who is justice involved, who to not have a meaningful employment versus to have meaningful employment. You've taught in our prison systems. You've seen both sides of that conversation. Mm-hmm. What kind of difference does a job make? And what differences do you see in the lives that you've touched at Crossroads Solar?
All right, it's remarkable, and thanks, Chris, for staying, and you for saying how cool it is to be there. Just today, a guy got out of prison. He was in prison for 20 years for violent crimes, and his funding allowed him to buy a big truck, and it just guzzles gasoline. And he said today, I'm getting rid of my truck, I'm getting a small car. That's financial. He can now afford to buy a small fuel efficient car. another guy, he knows I play golf, and he asked me if I'd give him golf lessons. So yesterday we were out in the front of the building, me teaching him how to swing a golf club. The fact that he's thinking about a recreational sport like golf is, to me, means he's transitioned in life to thinking about the good side of it. And I think that list just goes on. Watching somebody learn how to use a cell phone that's been in prison for 35 years, and trying to figure out how you how you access. We give them a retirement match, and at first he was reluctant, as many were, because they tend to see life in short term. After some convincing, most of them took the retirement match. And one guy was trying to figure out how to access the app on his phone so he could see how much money he had in it. And it was almost comical watching him even try, and other people helping him who weren't that skilled at it either, because they spent too much time in prison. But now they all got it, and they're carrying phones, and it's great. So
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah. And as we're coming up on the top of the hour, I want to extend my thanks to Nicole and Chris and Patrick for sharing the great information with us today. Our email addresses are on your screen, and not to worry, a copy of this presentation, slide deck, and recording will be sent to everybody who registered for the webinar. We want to thank you again for attending, and we titled this presentation, "Let There Be Light." And so let's all go out there and capture some of that light coming from that shiny thing in the sky, and use it to power our buildings and our houses of worship to make the planet a better place. Thank you very much for attending today, and we'll talk to you all soon.